Welcome to another episode of I Am Tired of Church. What is the will of God in your life? Are you in the will of God? Are you walking in the will of God? You hear that all the time in churchianity. You know, Romans 12:1 says, hey, offer your body as a living sacrifice. All right, this is perfect. This is perfect for God. If you go into the church system and you know, if you say, man, I just want to come to church on Sundays and don't want to be bothered and want to go home and, you know, be a good person, be a mom to my children, a dad to my children, be a good son, father, uncle, aunt, whatever, and come back next Sunday. Oh, brother, you're not in the will of God. If you say, oh, man, I want to be in the ministry and serve here and serve there and help the homeless and feed the poor, oh, that's the perfect will of God. Have you ever considered what is the will of God in your life? How about the will of God is exactly where you're at right now? A lot of times we use this guilt trip. And if we're not doing something that we feel like we want to do, we should be doing, it's like, I'm not in the will of God. You're in the will of God as we speak. If you're a mom, you don't think that's the will of God? If you're a dad, a brother, a sister, that's the perfect will of God. There is no, find the will of God in your life. You think you, for some reason, by your wisdom, can be out of the will of God? You think a person who is not right with the Lord, according to what we call right, because we have weird standards sometimes, is not right with the Lord? So then what happens? They come back to church and they rededicate. What is that and where'd that come from? Rededicate your life to the Lord. Now you're in the will of God. You weren't in the will of God a day ago, now you're in the will of God. Oh, you slipped again? Oh, now you're out of the will of God. You're in the will of God as we speak. You are here because of the will of God. Tomorrow, you're going to be whatever you're going to be because of the will of God. You know why? Because your very breath is because of the will of God. Try to stop yourself from breathing for 5, 10, 20 minutes. You won't be able to. Because of the will of God. You are perfectly in the will of God. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I want to improve here, I want to improve there, I want to be a better person, I want to feed the poor and all that. But don't do all that because you're trying to find the will of God in your life. You are in the perfect will of God as we speak. You don't have to be perfect. In one of my videos, I said, you know what? God likes you as you are. He enjoys your presence. You are in His will. Don't ever believe that nonsense that you need to come into the will of God. Yeah, now you might say, well, you don't know what I've done. Brother, you have no idea. I'm doing this. I'm strung out over here. I'm not. You're in the will of God. And I'll tell you why. That's the reason why God's grace cannot be outdone. You don't think you can out-sin God's grace. Don't think that for one moment what Jesus Christ did was not enough to take you out of the will of... No, you're in the will of God. To somehow remove you. Now you're not in the will of God. You're cast out. Get out of here, gnashing your teeth. Nah, God doesn't operate that way. God is not like us, just a little bit better. He's not a superhuman. God is God. Sometimes we treat God as a superhuman. If we do this and do that, then now we're in the perfect will of God. You know, we might do that to our children when we're not acting right, or the children are not misbehaving. Come on, that's not what I want you to do. But if your child was perfect, you might say, I wish my child wasn't so perfect. He needs to stir up some trouble. Do something wrong. Come on, child. You are in God's perfect will. Don't get disheartened. Don't get troubled in your spirit. Smile at yourself in the mirror and say, I know I'm in the will of God. Why? Because you are God's child. You see, in the book of Proverbs, it says, hey, a man might make his plans, but God is going to direct his steps. So you can try to be out of the will of God, although it's impossible. And the only way you'll be out of the will of God is up here in your mind. You'll create this barrier between you and God that He doesn't see. You are in God's will. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget that what Jesus Christ did is enough.